So where is OpenAI really headed? Beyond all the headlines and the speculation. Today, we're going to find the answer by looking at one source, and one source only, their own official documents. That's right, we have dug through nearly 50 official publications. I'm talking blogs, technical reports, system cards, the whole shebang. We did the reading, so you don't have to. The whole point here is to piece together their actual strategy, based only on what they have put in writing. So let's get into the evidence. Okay, let's just cut right to the chase. Here's the entire conclusion, right up front, based purely on their documents. Number one, they're making a massive technical shift from just predicting the next word to building models that can actually reason their way through complex problems. Number two, safety is no longer just a nice idea. It's being turned into a rigid, hierarchical governance system that's literally baked into the models. And number three, they're not just trying to build a better product, they're trying to build the entire infrastructure for a new ecosystem of intelligence. Now, we're going to prove those 3 points by walking through 5 key areas. We'll look at the big recurring theme you see in everything they write. We'll trace the timeline of how their strategy has changed. We'll break down their explicit plan for safety, look at their repeatable development pattern, and finally, and this is the really fun part, we'll look at the gap between public perception and the published reality. All right, first up, let's dive into the single most dominant theme that pops up again and again across all of OpenAI's recent publications. And that is the shift from an AI that simply answers to an AI that truly reasons. Their entire technical focus has fundamentally pivoted. They are moving away from what you could call System 1 thinking, that fast, intuitive, pattern-matching response we see in models like GPT-4o. Instead, they are going all in on System 2 thinking. This is a much slower, more deliberate, step-by-step analytical process, and it's the entire foundation for their new O series of models. And the core mechanism behind this is something called chain of thought. It's a pretty simple idea, but it's a real game changer. Basically, the model has to show its work. Just like in math class, it's forced to write out every single logical step it took to get to an answer. This is huge because it doesn't just lead to better and more accurate results. It also allows you to actually see how the AI is thinking, which is absolutely crucial for safety. And this right here shows you exactly why they're so obsessed with it. I mean, look at these performance numbers from their own reports on super complex tasks. On competition-level math problems, the O1 model is scoring over 83%. For expert-level science questions, GPT 5.2 is projected to clear 93%. This isn't just a small bump. Their own documents call this a phase change in capability. So the one thing to take away from this section is this. OpenAI's main technical goal isn't really about making a better chatbot anymore. It's about building a general-purpose engine that can solve complex, multi-step problems. Okay, so how did they get to this point? Well, if you lay out their official documents on a timeline, a very clear and deliberate story starts to emerge, showing exactly how their strategy has evolved. If you look at it chronologically, the narrative is pretty clear. 2023 was all about scaling up the foundational models like GPT-4. 2024 was about adding senses with multimodality and, really importantly, formalizing their governance structure. 2025 has been the year of reasoning, plus a big strategic move into open-weight models. And looking ahead, the stated focus is squarely on autonomous agents and building the massive infrastructure needed to support all of it. So the crucial point here is that unmistakable transition. OpenAI has clearly matured from a more freewheeling research and development lab into a highly structured organization that is deliberately building what looks a lot like a global utility for intelligence. And that organizational maturity leads us directly to our third major point, OpenAI's very explicit and increasingly rigid strategy for making safety a core part of the institution itself. Right at the heart of this strategy is a public document they call the model spec. And honestly, the best way to think of it is as a literal constitution for their AI. It's a document that dictates in detail how the models are required to behave. Now, this is where it gets really fascinating because this document creates an explicit chain of command. Think about it this way. When you, the user, type in a prompt, your instruction is at the very bottom of the hierarchy. Your request can be overridden by the developer's instructions for the app, which can then be overridden by OpenAI's system-wide rules, and all of those are overridden by the highest authority, the root principles. And here's a perfect real-world example of a root-level rule. This is directly from their principles for protecting users under 18. These rules, things like refusing to engage in harmful roleplay and actively encouraging teens to talk to a trusted adult if a risk comes up, these aren't just suggestions. They are coded as non-negotiable commands at the highest level of the AI's constitution. So the main takeaway here is that safety has been formalized. It's been institutionalized. It's not just a policy document on a website anymore. It is a rigid, auditable governance system that's hard-coded into the models and overseen directly by a committee on the board of directors. And this methodical approach isn't just for safety. It's actually part of a remarkably consistent development playbook that you see them run again and again and again in their documents. It doesn't matter if it's a new reasoning model like O1 or a video model like Sora, they follow the exact same 5-step process, which they call iterative deployment. They build the new capability. They evaluate it intensely. They document everything in public system cards. They deploy it, but in a limited way. And then they learn from how it's used in the real world to start the cycle all over again. It's a very deliberate process that prioritizes controlled releases. So the one thing to understand about their method is this disciplined, repeatable cycle. They've stated very clearly that they believe this gradual process is the most responsible way to introduce powerful technology into the world and give society time to adapt. And this brings us to our final and maybe most revealing section, comparing the common public perception of OpenAI with the reality that's actually described in their own published documents. First, let's talk safety. The common perception, driven by a lot of headlines, is that safety is an afterthought and that key teams were dissolved. But the published reality from their official documents shows the exact opposite. Safety has been elevated from a single team's job to a board-level committee with veto power, and it's been hard-coded into the AI's core logic. Next, let's tackle the closed AI idea. The perception is that they've abandoned their open mission. The documented reality shows a major strategic pivot to release powerful open-weight models. And their stated goal for doing this is pretty bold. They want to make their safety and reasoning frameworks the default standard for the entire industry. And finally, their ultimate purpose. The common perception is they're just building a better chatbot, right? But their documents describe something way more ambitious, a universal general reasoning engine that's designed to be a utility for science and autonomous agents. The chat interface that we all use is just one window into that much bigger engine. So, after analyzing their own words, what can we say for sure? Well, their number one technical priority is achieving multi-step reasoning. Safety is managed by a strict hierarchical system. Their goal is a platform for problem-solving agents, and their method is a slow, iterative deployment cycle. This is what the documents clearly tell us. But it's just as important to be honest about what the documents don't say. They give no hard deadline for AGI. They don't disclose all their training data, and they openly acknowledge that verifying a model's reasoning is true and not deceptive is still an unsolved problem. Sticking to the evidence means recognizing these are still open questions. So in the end, this analysis of OpenAI's official documents leaves us with a really provocative question. As this artificial intelligence becomes the new infrastructure for our world, the real question becomes, who gets to write the rules?